Welcome to Werribee Primary School. We choose to look at Werribee Primary School because it is located in a rural community in Melbourne that is currently experiencing diversity growth and expansion. The community contains 2% of Indigenous population. Werribee Primary School has over 35% Indigenous student population school-wide. Although Werribee registers a much lower international birth rate than the Victorian average, the school appreciates the contemporary diversity movement, and as such employs an anti-racist pedagogy by not tolerating discrimination and having policies in place for any student or staff that violate. In addition to this pedagogy, the school aspires to normalize Indigenous perspectives within classrooms. Unfortunately, the school does not have enough funds to afford to recruit additional teachers and invest in necessary amenities. As a result, teachers would prefer to work at neighboring schools in the region as they are able to afford hiring additional resources. We choose to look at grade 3-4W at the Werribee Primary School. 5 out of 24 students in the classroom are of an Indigenous background. However, 3 of these students do not state on test papers that they are. 3 out of 24 students are refugees. The 3 refugee students are also considered as ESL students. 1 student was diagnosed with ADHD at the beginning of the school year. The 1 student who was diagnosed with ADHD at the beginning of the school year had an integration aid that is present for 40% of the school day. The graph contains the NAPLAN results for 3-4W, and by looking at the graph we are able to see that 6 students were able to receive above the national average and majority of the students were at the national average, and 4 students are below standard. This shows the need for inclusive classroom. Making students feel that they are part of the community and help them feel a sense of belonging is very important. By comparison, the majority of the other classes either have none or maybe 1 refugee students. 3-4W is one of the classes in Werribee Primary School that are very multicultural and diverse.
So, we as a group believe that collaborative learning is an educational approach to teaching and learning that involves groups of students working together to solve a problem, complete a task, or create a product. This idea is taken one step further by the view that collaborative learning is based on the idea that learning is a social act in which students talk among themselves. It is through these conversations that students are able to learn effectively. Collaborative learning is hence an active process where students assimilate the information and relate this new knowledge to a framework of prior learning. Through our research, our group discovered that collaborative learning involves a challenge that allows learners to actively engage and support their peers, also allowing students to be made aware of diverse viewpoints. Through collaborative learning, students can flourish in a social environment. There are 5 components of collaborative learning arrangements. These include positive interdependence, individual accountability, face-to-face promotive interaction, appropriate use of collaborative skills, and group processing. Positive interdependence means that each student's success is not only tied to their own success, but is tied to the success of the group. Individual accountability means that every individual student is made accountable as the performance of each student is assessed and the results are given back to the group. Face-to-face learning is intimate. Face-to-face interactions allow students to orally explain how to solve problems, as well as discuss the nature of the concepts being learned, teaching one's knowledge to classmates, and connecting present with past learning. Collaborative learning requires interpersonal and small group skills such as decision-making, communication, and trust building. This involves the group coming together and talking about how their group is going in completing the task and how they will collaboratively meet their mutual learning goals to complete the task at hand. Examples of collaborative learning arrangements may include a think, write, pair, share, a fishbowl debate, or a group problem-solving session. A think, write, pair, share involves students thinking independently about a question that has been posed, forming ideas of their own and writing them down. Then students are grouped in pairs where they discuss their thoughts. Finally, these pairs share their ideas with a larger group. A fishbowl debate involves students who are seated inside the fishbowl actively participating in the discussion by sharing their opinions and asking questions, while the students outside the fishbowl listen to the ideas. Group problem solving involves students working together as a group to solve a problem. An example could be when a whole class group comes together to solve a complex maths problem.
So I went to West Grove Primary School for my placement and I taught grade 2 students. During one of the lessons, I included one of the collaborative strategies, which was the Think, Bend, Share. In my lesson, I put a picture on the board and I wanted the students to think about the picture and what ideas they can come up with. So I asked the students about a picture and what they're seeing, and turn to the person next to them and share their ideas with one another. Then afterward, I would ask each pair to share their ideas. However, there were a few pairs who did not want to share their ideas, and that was completely fine. This strategy was very useful because sometimes students do not want to share their ideas in front of the whole class, maybe because of embarrassment or their shyness. And by applying this strategy into the lesson, it would make the students feel more comfortable, feel more welcome.
So for my placement, I went to Milana College in Mitcham. I used a number of collaborative learning arrangements in my lessons to better engage students into their learning and for enjoyment. In particular, I taught Year 7 Science and I took a lesson on space and the phases of the moon. A collaborative learning arrangement strategy that I used was group problem solving. I split the class into two groups and they played a matching game where the groups had to match a correct picture with the correct phase name. The students found this fun because they got to compete against other classmates and they were really engaged in this activity.
Firstly, Emerson notes that students articulate their thoughts more freely, receive confirming and constructive feedback, engage in questioning techniques, receive additional practice on skills, and have increased opportunities to respond. This is all primarily due to the small group work which collaborative learning activities are structured around. Kagan and Kagan note the smaller the group, the higher the engagement levels. Within these groups, students are often allocated a role in which they must complete. For example, in a structured learning group of 4, one student is a researcher, the other a scribe, the other a presenter, and the other a captain. With this structure, no student is excluded and groups as well as group roles are allocated by teachers who ensure a mix of abilities are present. Newby's research showed that flexible mixed ability groups have advantages over equally grouped students because the higher achieving students can mentor the students who are struggling with a particular skill or a concept. At the same time, the students who are more competent with a particular skill deepen their own learning by applying higher-level thinking skills while assisting others to achieve better. The small and intimate group size allows for students to not feel overwhelmed and intimidated by the traditional group size of 23, and therefore students are more inclined to express their views and talk more freely as no student is left out of the dialogue, as stated by Emerson. Efficacy can be defined as the performance of collaborative learning arrangements under ideal and controlled circumstances, whereas effectiveness refers to its performance under real-world conditions. Hence, the efficacy of collaborative learning arrangements is as follows. Gillies notes throughout his book Cooperative Learning, Integrating Theory and Practice, the worth of collaborative learning arrangements. Firstly, the strategy improves student self-esteem. This is because the collaborative learning arrangements, whether that is a jigsaw or think, pair, share, help students develop a sense of responsibility and ownership of their ideas that they are developing in conjunction with others. Furthermore, the feedback that can be offered through the small groups by either their peers or their teacher can further improve and build self-esteem as the student begins to feel as if their ideas are of worth and value to not only the class but also answering the question or completing the project. Gillies further discusses the efficacy of this strategy by focusing on the safe learning environment and therefore better classroom success rates and products that collaborative learning arrangements promote. Firstly, the safe learning environment is bred from the understanding that is set by the teacher at the start of the lesson concerning what is expected of each student and the values that should be shown in order to work collaboratively. By setting the expectation at the beginning of the lesson, students will begin to understand that they are expected to play a more active role in their learning by working on problems that require them to think through solutions that may not be readily apparent. The problem may mean that students must involve themselves in searching for information and working with their peers to solve problems, create reasoning, and think critically about a situation. This creates the safe learning environment as no one is accused of being wrong or embarrassed of their answer, as students are collectively attempting to research and come to a consensus on a solution. The effectiveness of collaborative learning arrangements is as follows. From this researching and critically thinking, better classroom success rates and products are achieved as different students bring diverse attributes to the group. Through collaborative learning, students are able to learn from each other and develop new skills that may not be able to be fostered if working individually. Gillies notes an example of this in his book. He begins by describing John's classroom. The collaborative learning arrangement in which John has enacted in his classroom is a small group project that consists of 4 students. Each student is given a role, however 3 out of the 4 students struggle to represent their work in a neat and concise manner. The 4th group member was able to illustrate to the other 3 students the systematic way in which the information should be presented. Hence, the success of the project was elevated due to the different skills in which each member brought to the group, as well as the peer learning that occurred. However, although the efficacy of the strategy in providing these opportunities for students, there are also obstacles to collaborative learning that are important to mention. In Jennison and Wooble's study, whereby 19 teachers and 23 students in different discipline areas were interviewed about their thoughts on collaborative learning arrangements, specifically the obstacles to effective student collaboration. The study concluded that both teachers and students believe that 4 obstacles challenge the efficiency of this strategy. They are lack of collaborative skills amongst the students, free riding, competence status, and friendship. Although the teacher can address many of these obstacles through the setting of expectations before any collaborative learning arrangements are made, they are important to note. When evaluating the success that collaborative learning arrangements offer to students, it is important to enact evaluation tools in which cater for all students' diversity. A tool that may be used by the teacher is an ongoing assessment task sheet. This sheet covers a wide variety of categories that span from social skills to knowledge criteria. The variability allows for students that may have a different race, cultural or religious background, or even language background to still be included, as the assessment of the work is based off collaborative skills, knowledge, and students' individual willingness to work together. A second tool is the teacher assessing the group and their efforts to immerse themselves into the collaborative learning environment. When students are thinking aloud while discussing, teachers are better able to assess student and group needs and intervene if needed. That is, by actively monitoring students' learning, teachers are able to redirect groups towards learning tasks and provide reteaching during mini-conferences as appropriate. When structures are in place for this level of dialogue to occur, it accelerates the comprehension process. The third tool is one used by students. The creatives of the evaluation, Wood and Chen, note that in their first attempt at an effective evaluation process, they solicited input from students on the contribution of each member of the team. They had students complete an evaluation form, which can be seen on the screen for every other team member. The evaluation was done by each student at the end of the semester and handed in to the instructor. Woods and Chen note that this approach allowed students to approve or counter the evaluation of their efforts. This approach made students more aware of applying fairness to the process. Students who were less than honest about their own contribution were subject to an approval process by other students. This is fairer to the students because it allows them the opportunity to make corrective action through the remainder of the project if they have problems. The approach also triggers communication between team members where it might be lacking. Both Woods and Chen found this evaluation approach to work successfully. Furthermore, this approach is effective as the variability in skills being assessed allows for each group member, regardless of if they have physical, social, and intellectual characteristics, to be able to have their say that they contributed to a portion of the final piece of work. To end, it is also important to acknowledge that collaborative teaching arrangements do not always suit every student, and many students will have diverse ways in which they learn best, which can affect the successfulness of the strategy and the results that are collected to evaluate the successfulness of using this strategy within your classroom.